I still remember the exact feeling of standing on that gleaming showroom floor, the smell of new leather and polished chrome all around me, and watching a man in a tailored suit look me up and down like I was something he had accidentally stepped on. He didn't say a word to me. He didn't have to. The way his eyes slid right past me, the way he turned his back and walked toward a couple in designer clothes on the other side of the room. That said everything. I had driven 40 minutes to that dealership because my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter Sophia, had spent 3 weeks researching the safest family SUV on the market after her school did a road safety project. She had printed out articles. She had highlighted statistics. She had handed me a little folder with her careful, round handwriting on the cover that said, "Daddy's New Car Research," and I had promised her that if the reviews were right and the price was right, we would go look at one together on her next day off from school. I kept that promise. I showed up, and within 4 minutes of walking through those glass doors, I was being escorted back out of them. Now, I want you to tell me, was I wrong for what happened next? Because by the end of this story, things took a turn that I genuinely did not see coming, and I'm still not entirely sure how to feel about all of it. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I am and where I was in my life when this all happened. Otherwise, the rest of it won't hit the way it should. My name is Marcus, I'm 38 years old, and for the last 6 years I have been raising Sophia entirely on my own. Her mother and I separated when Sophia was 3, and after a long and painful legal process that I won't get into tonight, I was awarded full custody. It was not the life I had imagined for myself, but the moment that judge's gavel came down, and I looked across the courtroom at my little girl sitting with the caseworker, coloring in a notebook without a care in the world, I made a decision. I was going to be everything for her. I was going to be the dad who shows up every single time, for everything, and for 6 years I have done exactly that. I coach her soccer team on Saturday mornings. I learned how to do a proper braid because she wanted to stop going to the salon and have me do her hair instead. I have read every single book in the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series out loud with her, doing all the voices, including the embarrassing ones. Being her father is the single greatest thing I have ever done with my life. That part I am completely certain of. What I was less certain of, for a long time, was my career. I spent my 20s working in logistics, warehouse management, grinding through shift work while putting myself through night school. When Sophia came along, I doubled down, not because I loved the work, but because I needed the stability. A few years ago, though, something shifted. A former professor of mine connected me with a small logistics consulting firm that was looking to scale, and I had spent enough time on the floor of those warehouses to know things that people sitting in offices with MBAs simply did not know. They hired me as a senior consultant, and within 18 months, I had brought in enough client savings through supply chain restructuring that they made me a partner. I am telling you this not to brag, because honestly, money has never been the point for me. I'm telling you, because it's important context for what happened at that dealership, because nothing about the way I look signals any of that. I am a big guy. I have calloused hands from years of physical work that I've never quite lost even in the years since I moved off the floor. I drive an old pickup truck, a 2009 model that I have maintained religiously because it runs perfectly well and I see no reason to replace something that still does its job. I wear jeans and work boots most days unless I have a client meeting. I do not wear watches that cost more than a car payment. I look, I suppose, like a man who works with his hands for a living, and at that dealership, on that particular Saturday morning, I had come straight from Sophia's soccer game, so I was wearing a fleece, grass-stained sneakers, and I had a 9-year-old holding my hand. The dealership was one of those high-end places, marble floors, soft lighting, cars displayed like sculptures in a gallery, salespeople moving through the space with the quiet, practiced confidence of people who have learned to sort the serious buyers from the browsers very quickly. I understand that skill exists. I even understand why it exists. What I do not accept is what that skill becomes when it is applied not based on behavior or intent, but based on what someone looks like. We walked in, Sophia and I, and she immediately started pulling me toward the silver SUV in the center of the room. She knew exactly which trim level she had researched. She had the spec sheet in her little folder. She pointed at it and said, "That's the one, Daddy. It got a 5-star crash rating on the side impact test." I laughed. I genuinely laughed because only my daughter would lead with the side impact test. I squeezed her hand and said, "Then let's go take a look." A salesman, I'll call him Derek, because that felt like his energy, glanced over at us from near the reception desk. He did that thing That very specific thing where his eyes did a quick up and down, a calculation that lasted maybe 2 seconds, and then he looked away. He didn't come over, he picked up his phone instead. A couple had walked in right behind us well-dressed, the woman carrying a bag that probably cost more than my truck. Derek materialized at their side within 30 seconds. Hand extended, enormous smile, the whole performance. I stood there with Sophia for a full 5 minutes. No one came over. I walked toward the silver SUV. Sophia started pointing out the features she had memorized. The panoramic roof, the third-row seating. The heated seats that she informed me were very important for winter. Daddy, I was smiling and listening to her and completely prepared to have an actual conversation about purchasing this vehicle. That was when a different employee approached us. Younger, probably mid-20s, with the nervous energy of someone acting on instruction rather than initiative. He did not introduce himself, he said, and I want to be precise here because I have replayed this enough times that I know I am not misremembering. He said, "Excuse me. Sir, this is a private showroom for serious inquiries. There's a public auto fair happening at the convention center this weekend if you're looking for something more accessible." I looked at him for a long moment. Sophia had gone quiet. She was looking up at me with those big eyes, and I could see on her face that she understood something had just happened, even if she couldn't name it yet. I asked him calmly, "Are you asking me to leave?" He said, "I'm just letting you know about other options." I asked him directly, "Is there a reason you've decided I'm not a serious inquiry?" He fumbled for a moment, said something about the showroom being busy and wanting to make sure all customers were directed to the right resources. I looked around that showroom, which was not busy by any reasonable definition of the word. I took a breath. I thought about Sophia beside me. I thanked him in the flattest voice I own, took my daughter's hand, and we walked out. In the parking lot, Sophia was quiet for a moment and then she said, "Did they not want us in there?" And I had to figure out, in real time, how to answer that question in a way that was honest without being devastating. I told her that sometimes people make wrong assumptions about other people, and that it was a reflection of them, not of us. She nodded very seriously and said, "That's not very good customer service." I almost laughed again, but I didn't, because there was a tightness in my chest that I needed to sit with for a minute before I could find anything funny. We got in my old pickup, and she patted my arm and said, "It's okay, Daddy, we can find a better dealership." And she was right. I knew she was right. I should have just driven away and found that better dealership. Here's where I want to stop and put something to you, because this is exactly the moment where everything pivoted. I was sitting in my truck in that parking lot, and I had a choice. I could leave, find another dealer, buy the car, and move on with my life. Or I could do something else. I want you to pause right here for a second and drop a comment below. What would you have done? Would you have walked away and given your business to someone who deserved it? Or would you have felt that same thing I felt? That specific bone-deep thing that said no, not today, not in front of my daughter, done something about it? Tell me in the comments. Because I genuinely want to know. Because what I decided to do next is either the most satisfying or the most petty thing I have ever done depending on how you look at it. Maybe it was both. What I did was this. I sat in my truck, pulled out my phone and looked up the dealership. I found their corporate ownership structure. It was part of a regional luxury auto group, and I found the name of the CEO. I will not share his real name, but I'll call him Richard. Richard had a LinkedIn profile and a business email format that was easy enough to guess. I spent 20 minutes in that parking lot writing him a professional, detailed email. I described exactly what had happened, the timeline, the salesman who ignored us, the young employee who suggested we go to the convention center. I was not emotional in the email, I was precise. I included the time we arrived, the duration we waited, the specific language used. I told him I had been prepared to purchase the vehicle outright, not finance, purchase, and that I was a partner at a consulting firm. I attached my business card as a PDF, and then I drove away and took Sophia to her favorite noodle place for lunch, where she cheered up immediately and spent 40 minutes telling me about a book she wanted to read next. I did not expect to hear back. I sent the email as an act of documentation, of record, because sometimes the only thing that makes you feel less powerless is the act of saying, "This happened, I am naming it, and someone responsible should know." I heard back in less than 2 hours. Richard himself replied, not a customer service rep, not an assistant, Richard. His email was short, professional, and direct. He said he had read my email carefully, that he was deeply troubled by what I had described, and that he would like to call me personally if I was willing. I almost didn't reply. Something in me wanted to let it sit. wanted to not make it easier for the institution that had embarrassed my daughter to smooth things over quickly. But Sophia's voice was in my head saying better dealership. And I thought about what kind of model of the world I wanted to show her. I replied and gave him my number. He called within the hour. What came next was not what I expected. Richard did not open with a defensive explanation or a careful corporate apology designed to minimize liability. He opened by saying, "I want to start by telling you that I'm sorry, not as the CEO of this company, just as a person. What you described is wrong, and I want you to know that before anything else." I sat with that for a moment. Then he said something that genuinely surprised me. He said, "My father raised me on his own from the time I was 7. He was a mechanic. He used to talk about the way people looked at him when he walked into places, the way they dismissed him before he ever opened his mouth. I became who I am partly because of how hard that was for him, and partly because of his determination in spite of it. Your email hit me in a very specific way. We talked for almost 40 minutes. He told me that the employee who had approached me had been flagged before for this kind of behavior and that today's incident would be handled seriously. He did not tell me the details of what that meant, and I didn't ask, because it wasn't my place. He told me about an internal retraining initiative he had been trying to push through and how this was going to accelerate that process. He asked me about Sophia. I told him about the research folder. He was quiet for a moment after I said that, and then he said, "She sounds like an extraordinary kid." I told him she absolutely was. At the end of the call, he asked if I would be willing to come back to the dealership, not to that location, but to their flagship location downtown, and said he would personally ensure we received the full, respectful purchasing experience that we should have had from the beginning. He said there would be no pressure, no sales tactics, no strings attached. If I wanted to buy the car, they would be honored to have my business. If I didn't, he completely understood. I thought about it for 2 days. I talked to Sophia about it, because I have always believed in including her in decisions that affect her, even when she's too young to fully carry the weight of them. I explained that the man in charge had called and apologized and invited us back. She asked, "Was he nice?" I told her he had been genuinely nice, that he had talked about his own dad. She thought about it with that serious face she makes when she's really considering something, and then she said, "I think we should go back, because if he's trying to make it better, then we should give him a chance to do that." 9 years old. I want you to sit with that for a second. 9 years old and already understanding that accountability and second chances can exist in the same space. I have no idea where she got that wisdom, but it was not from me. We went back on the following Saturday. Richard met us in the parking lot personally. He shook my hand and then bent down to shake Sophia's hand too, which made her giggle because no adult had ever shaken her hand like she was a business person before. He introduced us to a senior sales associate named Cynthia, who was warm and knowledgeable and who spoke directly to Sophia as much as to me, asking her what features she had researched and what mattered most to her in the decision. Sophia unzipped her folder. Cynthia's face lit up. She said, "You brought notes? I love that. Okay, let's go through this together." They walked the showroom floor side by side, Sophia reading from her printed articles, Cynthia confirming and expanding on the information. I walked a half step behind them and felt something in my chest loosen that I hadn't realized had been wound tight since the moment we had been turned away. We did a test drive. So sat in the back and kept pressing the button to open and close the panoramic roof and saying, "This is very fancy," every single time it moved. We negotiated honestly and without games. I purchased the vehicle that afternoon. Richard came to say goodbye when we were finalizing paperwork. He looked at Sophia one more time and said, "Take good care of your dad, okay? He sounds like a pretty great one." Sophia said very seriously, "I know, I already do." Driving home in a brand new SUV with Sophia in the back seat, still experimenting with every button and feature and narrating her findings to me, I felt something that was complicated and good at the same time. I felt the sting of what had happened at that first dealership still, because things like that don't dissolve entirely just because they end well. I also felt something that I can only describe as gratitude. Not for the car, but for the way things had unfolded. Because Richard could have sent a form letter, he could have had his PR team manage it, he chose not to, and Sophia got to witness that. She got to see that speaking up, doing it calmly and clearly, sometimes actually matters. She got to see that some people, when they are in a position of power and choose to use it with integrity, can genuinely shift the temperature of a situation. And she got to see her dad hold his head up the entire time. That part mattered most to me. I've thought a lot about what the lesson of this whole experience is, and I keep coming back to the same place. Dignity is not something that gets granted to you by the people who look at you and decide you deserve it. It's something you carry with you, and it's something you model for the people watching you, especially the small people watching you. Sophia was watching me that whole day, in the parking lot, on the phone with Richard, and in that downtown showroom. I hope what she saw was a person who knew his own worth without needing anyone else to confirm it. I hope she carries that into every room she ever walks into for the rest of her life. Because she will walk into rooms where people look at her and make instant decisions about who she is and what she deserves. And when that happens, I want her folder to be ready. I want her research to be impeccable. And I want her to know, bone deep, without a single doubt, that she belongs exactly where she decided to be. If this story resonated with you, I'd love it if you hit the like button, because trust me, there were moments in this where I needed every bit of support I could get. Subscribe if you want more stories like this, because I have more of them, and I promise they are all just as messy and real and occasionally surprising as this one. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did I do the right thing sending that email? Would you have just found a different dealership and let it go? I genuinely read every single comment, and I want to hear from you. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Sophia tonight, even if you didn't know you were. I'll see you all in the next story.